Welcome into the Fantasy Guides podcast. My name is Andrew Teuscher, and I am joined today by the owner, the operator of Fantasy Guides and FantasyGuides.com, Stephen Rippey, and we are brought to you today in order to go over every single matchup heading into Week 14 to get you into your playoffs, but it won't be easy. It can't be easy. It never is easy. We've got Bye-Mageddon upon us. 6 teams on bye. That does mean a shorter episode to consume and make, but it also means we're going to have to get nasty, Steven. You ready to get nasty with some of these starts today?
Yeah, I just realized in one league I'm going to have to start a Drew Lock, I think, Andrew. Drew Lock I have to start.
May God have mercy on your soul, Steven. But I'm sure you're not the only one who's going to be having issues, so we're going to go ahead and get right into it. The first matchup we have, it's not offering many solutions, but some players you may have to play anyway. We've got the Jacksonville Jaguars going into Tennessee with a 3.5 point spread in their favor. Is a 39.5 point over-under. Steven, the Jaguars side of the ball. What are you thinking for Mr. Brian Thomas now that we know Mac Jones will be the starter?
I think you downgrade him, obviously with Trevor Lawrence out for the year, but I'm still starting him. We saw last week he could have had 40 points. He had a long touchdown that Mac Jones just missed him on. The big 50-some yarder that he got, he almost housed that thing. So he's a big play waiting to happen. I got him as my wide receiver 20. Not a great matchup. Tennessee has given up the 7th fewest points to the position. So I'm tempering expectations a little bit, but I'm playing him. Evan Ingram, because he should get enough targets and he can do stuff with them. Typically, I've got him as my tight end 8. The running backs, I just have them more as RB3s. Not optimistic. I have ETN a little bit higher than Bigsby. This is almost a near even split, and I'm not expecting a lot from them.
Absolutely agree. It is just right down the middle what these two are sharing, and it's all kinds of snaps. So don't even believe anyone who's saying, well, it's the passing down snaps for this guy and it's the early down snaps for that dude. It's literally down the middle. It is each person's guess as to who will do better because ETN's been better as of late. Sure, take him. Both startable. Don't want to start either one. Now, the Titans side of the football. Will Levis is playing disgusting football, but he's learning from Jameis Winston, and it's fantasy relevant disgusting football. So, Steven, Will Levis, how high do you have him this week in your rankings?
I've got him as a high-end QB2 in this one. I think he could even finish better than that. He's scored at least 16 fantasy points in 4 straight weeks, and he's done that against better defenses, to be quite frank. And this is the worst defense. Jacksonville ranks dead last in fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. They give up the 2nd most passing yards and passing touchdowns. They give up actually the 3rd most rushing yards. He can run a little bit too when he wants to. So I like Will Levis in this one. I'm starting him in one league that I got Lamar Jackson. Starting him, Tony Pollard, I think he's a must start this week. I got him as my RB11. Everything I said about Will Levis is basically the same for pretty much all the positions. Jacksonville's defense is just not good. So Tony Pollard, my RB11. Calvin Ridley, my wide receiver 17. I think you can even start Tyjae Spears. I would start him over like Tank Bigsby, to be honest. I think they're in a similar role, but Spears just has a better matchup. So, I think there's some definitely startable Titans.
Nick Westbrook.
Keenan. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Touchdowns everywhere. Yes, you can start him. You have our permission. Get him in there. NWI. I don't like that nickname, NWI. It doesn't roll off the tongue, but man, I'm just tired of saying Nick Westbrook Akine. But getting enough snaps, getting enough targets, and of course, we've seen the downfield explosions against the Jaguars. Punch it on Bye-Mageddon. All right, let's move on to the next matchup. Jets, Dolphins. The Jets have just been an absolute misery these last few weeks. They're talking about who's playing quarterback next year. They've forgotten this season. Their defense forgot it too. But starting with the offensive side of the ball, it's Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I'm not excited to play him. He's hardly playable. Breece Hall probably isn't playing this week. He hasn't practiced yet. The receivers, no one knows who to play there. Steven, help the folks out. What do they do?
It's not been good. And the Dolphins are pretty good as far as not allowing fantasy points. They give up the 2nd fewest points to the wide receiver position. So I'm not super optimistic about Adams or Garrett Wilson. I do have Adams ranked a little bit higher because he is getting targeted more than Wilson since he's joined the team. I got him as my wide receiver 19. I've got Wilson as my wide receiver 22. Not a great matchup. Aaron Rodgers hasn't been playing that good. We just talked about Will Levis. I'm starting him over Aaron Rodgers. There's not very many quarterbacks, that I would not start Rodgers over a lot of quarterbacks right now. He's just not looking good. He can't get away from pressure. He's taking a lot of sacks. So I'm worried about this offense. Like you said, Brees Hall, if he goes at best, he's, I think, a mid-range RB2 in this matchup. The Dolphins aren't the worst matchup, but they're not the best either. He's just not been, it's been very hard to predict him and this whole entire offense. If he doesn't go, I think Braylon Allen, though, I do think he becomes kind of like a low-end RB2 that you can start. Was there anyone I was forgetting in this one? No, that's about it for the Jets, Andrew.
Not a lot going on for the Jets, yeah. So Braylon Allen, if he goes, that moves him above those Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne, Tyjae Spears options we had just mentioned above.
Yeah, and then
absolutely.
On the Dolphins side of the ball, I think you can start pretty much everybody. This Jets defense that we had thought was going to be very good just hasn't been that
Cancun
good.
On 3.
I know, seriously. Well, and Gardner, I don't think he's playing this week. He hasn't practiced all week, so I think he's out. So I think that obviously you're starting Achane, you're starting Tua. I think you can start probably Hill and Waddle. Oh, definitely Hill, but you could probably start Waddle in this one as well. And then the fantasy, he might be the league winner right now, Jonnu Smith at the tight end position. He's given you an insane advantage. Andrew, you had mentioned to me a list of players that he has outscored.
Oh, Steven, let me tell you, tight end GOAT. He's averaging 100 yards and a touchdown over his last 3 games. That's his average, not total. That's his average over the last 3 games. And the players that he's outscored this season, I'm not going to mention tight ends. That's too easy. He's a tight end 5.
Yeah.
Here's Cooper Kupp, Jonathan Taylor, DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Jalen Waddle, Deebo Samuel are all players that he is outscoring. He is the tight end GOAT.
To be fair, I think most of those guys you mentioned have missed games, but still, it's pretty incredible what he's doing. He is, I mean, he kind of has taken off more recently, but at this point, it's just funny, the whole Arthur Smith thing from last year. But he's averaging almost 13 fantasy points per game, something that Kyle Pitts has never even sniffed.
Nope. Kyle Pitts, I have him in a league that I care very much about, and yeah, I'd rather have Jonnu Smith at this point. So, Jonnu Smith, the GOAT, he's ready to roll against the Jets. The Falcons, they go into Minnesota to take on the Vikings. And 2 weeks ago, we would have been talking about a high-flying matchup with incredible offense on both sides. Now, all of a sudden, people are trying to open up the retirement home for Kirk Cousins. I'm surprised there's not a GoFundMe out there to get him off of the field and into a retirement home. But man, Falcons, who are you? Bijan Robinson, sure, check, whatever, throw it out the window. What are the receiving options in Atlanta now? Who do you feel safe starting?
It's kind of funny. Everybody got so upset for the Falcons taking Michael Penix in the top 10, but now we could see a quarterback switch sooner than people are thinking, or maybe they are already thinking it. But yeah, Kirk Cousins, ever since that game in Tampa that feels like it was 10 years ago where he had over 500 passing yards and 4 touchdowns, he had a couple of good games since then. Tampa, if he plays Tampa every week, he's the best quarterback on the planet. But other than that, he's had 1, 2, 3 single-digit game performances since then. No, 4. Sorry, I missed one. I missed his 2-point game last week against the Chargers. He's been awful. However, Drake London, if I'm not mistaken, was it Andrew, 16 targets last week?
16 targets last week.
Yeah, I don't care. If you're getting 16 targets, he's had at least 13 in 2 out of his last 3 games. So, yeah, and this is a good matchup actually for wide receivers. The Vikings giving up the most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. They're giving up the second most receptions. Yeah, I think you can definitely start. He's my wide receiver 4. I don't even know why I'm saying you can start him. I think Drake London is a very safe option this week. Tougher matchup for Bijan Robinson, but it doesn't matter. He's one of the best fantasy players in all of fantasy right now. And then Darnell Mooney, I got him as a wide receiver 3. Better than that, depending on how this offense goes. I do think there's a bit of a revenge game here. I think Kirk Cousins hopefully can play a little bit better going back to Minnesota in this one. I think he can be played. I'm not as optimistic about Kyle Pitts. The Vikings aren't as vulnerable to the tight end position. So I've got him as my tight end 16. So most leagues, I'm probably not starting.
Kyle Pitts played 40% of snaps last game. And when the head coach was asked, why did that happen? He didn't give quite a straightforward answer and just say, oh, it was injury. So Kyle Pitts, again, absolute misery in Atlanta. The Vikings side of the ball, we can be a little more excited about. This is an incredible matchup for the passing game. We've seen Lad McConkey. I love Lad McConkey. He just tore up this secondary. What do you think Justin Jefferson and the gang are about to do?
Yeah. And, it was looking bad for Jordan Addison for most of the season, but we've seen him pop off albeit matchups you wouldn't think he would. He's actually gone off in matchups where the opponent was good. He should be able to go off any week. He's a playmaker. Yeah, obviously you're starting Jefferson. He's my wide receiver 2 this week. I got Darnold all the way up as my QB4 this week. I'm starting him. I'm starting, obviously, Jefferson. Aaron Jones, he's my RB12 on the week. Matchup's not as great. Atlanta has been pretty decent against running backs. They're top 10, actually, in fantasy points allowed at the position. They do give up a ton of receptions, though. They give up the 4th most receptions. Maybe he can get it done a little bit in the receiving game. I'm not worried about it. Atlanta, because they're so bad against the wide receivers, they're actually a little bit better against tight ends, but I don't really care. I'm still starting TJ Hawkinson. He's my tight end 7.
Yeah, lots of volume there for Hawk. Of course, you're starting Aaron Jones, even though it's been kind of bad as of late. I'd still trust it. And hopefully we get a good revenge game out of Mr. Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, we need
could
it.
be a really fun one.
Yeah, I want a shoot. I also want Justin Jefferson. He's been fine this season, but he just hasn't had very many. He hasn't had any monster games. I want a monster game, Andrew.
Go out and stunt on him, JJ. We need to see something big. We're done with this just being consistent. Get someone into the playoffs all on your own. We know you can do it. Speaking of getting into the playoffs, neither the Saints or the Giants will be getting into the playoffs. Actually, I guess the Saints technically might, and they will be playing each other. New Orleans will be playing in New York against the Giants. The Saints are favored by 5, and it's a 40.5-point over-under. This just tells you everything you need to know about the state of the New York Giants. They are 5-point home dogs to the Chris Olave list, to the Taysom Hill list, to the Rashid Shaheed list, New Orleans Saints. But on the Saints side of the ball, Steven, Derek Carr, I think he's actually a weirdly okay, desperate stream. He's just been 15 points. He's not getting 20, but he's been getting 15. And you're starting Alvin Kamara, but the passing game's the question mark here. What are you thinking there?
I mean, I'm starting MVS probably if I'm desperate. I think he could come through. I've got him as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, but we know he can make that big play. Not the greatest matchup. The Giants actually have been pretty decent against the wide receiver position. Overall, they've been good against the tight ends too. The tight ends giving up the second fewest to tight ends. They're giving up the 13th fewest to wide receivers. So it's a little bit tougher matchup for them. So those guys are really, I'm only starting them if I'm desperate. Same with Derek Carr. I don't really want to start him because, like you said, his ceiling's just not that high. It is higher, though, without Taysom Hill there. So I think that his floor and ceiling have gone up a little bit, but I still think it's a lower ceiling. The weapons just aren't that good. Alvin Kamara, though, just start him. Obviously, you are already, but he's my RB2 on the week. He's going to get so much work.
Every week.
I am curious to see if we see some Kendre Miller this week. I think he should be good to go. Is it Dennis Allen? Is that the coach? That did not like him, did not seem to like him. I just put him on IR for no reason. He's now off IR, and I think he could play in this one. So I don't want to see him, take anything away from Kamara for fantasy purposes, but I'm just curious to see. We haven't really got to see that guy play much his entire career.
There's room for Alvin Kamara to share some and still be really, really good for fantasy. So hopefully we won't have to worry about that. Maybe 2 good backs in the situation. The New York Giants side of the ball, they've got a couple decent backs. And man, it's really, really, really top heavy for the Giants offense in terms of fantasy players. Tyrone Tracy, this is an excellent matchup. We saw a downgrade in overall carries last week. It was a weird thing. Maybe some fumbling issues. Well, he played 73% of snaps.
Yeah.
So I'm backing off the worry there. I'm willing to start Tracy in a great matchup. I want to play Malik Neighbors. He's getting the volume despite the lack of incredible production. And apparently you're willing to start Drew Lock.
Well, I'm forced to. It's a dynasty league, Andrew. So the rosters are pretty deep. So my options are him. I don't have a Will Levis option. I don't remember who the other one is. I'll have to look at it again. But right now, he's the guy I had to add. Tracy, though, you'd mentioned the usage hasn't been there as much recently. He's had 12 opportunities and 13 opportunities in back-to-back weeks. I'd love to see that go up this week because it is a good opponent. I think that the Giants defense will do enough to keep this game competitive. I know you said it's a 5-point spread. I'm seeing a 3.5-point spread, so maybe it'll be a little bit closer than we're thinking. So I do think Tracy will get a decent amount of work in this one. And the Saints haven't been very good against the running back position. They are a top 10 matchup to exploit. Malik Neighbors, weirdly, I love the reaction you get from fantasy players. Like, remember Malik Neighbors literally was the best wide receiver on the planet the first month of the season. And I just posted about, like, if we were drafting today, where would we rank these guys? And I had him 5 or 6 or something. And people were like, oh, he's worthless. He's terrible. He's not been terrible. He is hampered by the quarterback play here in New York. But over the last, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. His last 5 games, he's hit double-digit fantasy points in every game. He's averaged about 15 fantasy points per game. He's been fine. He hasn't given you those monster performances like he did the first couple weeks, but I would not be surprised if he could go over 20 points in this one. It is a good matchup. If Drew Lock can just resemble some sort of a quarterback, he's got the big arm. If he just throws it to Malik Neighbors, he should be able to put in a good game. So I like Malik Neighbors. I have him as a top 10 option this week. I even think Wan'Dale Robinson could be sneaky good in this one. I think the Saints not quite as good against the slot receivers. There is no more Marshawn Lattimore in this secondary. So I like the Giants pass catchers in this one. Darius Slayton as well as like deeper options because you can pass on the Saints right now.
Drew Lock, go to the game. Put on the headphones. Play some Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar. Get yourself locked in and throw the dang football to Malik Neighbors and check it down to Tyrone Tracy, and you will have a successful day. They should make me a head coach somewhere in the NFL. That's all you need to know.
Yeah,
throw it to your good players, and you'll have a good time. Well, good teams, good players on good teams, and here's a good team. The Eagles. They will be hosting the Carolina Panthers, and wow. I don't know where this line's moved to. I took this line yesterday. Philadelphia by 12 at home.
I got
the
12
Carolina Panthers have looked 12 and a half. It's moving the wrong way. The Panthers have looked feisty, but man, this is just a different Eagles team. Let's start there, Steven. I just want to start with the Eagles. Saquon Barkley, I'm going to go find a rushing yard line over under. Steven, where are you taking bets? What do you think the over under on his yard line is?
I don't know. I want to rank him higher than 1. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to try to figure out, can I rank him like RB0 or RB -1, something like that, because he should just break fantasy. The only reason he won't is they'll probably give, I'm blanking on the backup's name. They probably won't use him too much. Gainwell, because they won't need him. I think that he plays less snaps than he typically does, and he could be done by halftime. Because I don't think this game will be that competitive. I know Bryce Young's played a little bit better in recent weeks, but he hasn't faced the Eagles defense. This game's going to be a blowout. It's not going to be that competitive, in my opinion. I got Hurts as my QB1, obviously Barkley as my RB1. We didn't even talk about the Eagles. Just start your Eagles. There won't be, I believe Goddard is out in this one. So Calcaterra, I think he could be actually streamable this week, but it's mainly just start your Eagles.
His rushing line sitting at 100 yards. And that might not sound like a ton. That is insane.
That's high.
For an over-under.
Yeah.
Hopefully Kenneth Gainwell does not get too involved there. I think Grant Calcaterra is a great call-out. Whenever Goddard was out for a 4-game stretch, Calcaterra hit 8+ points in 3 out of 4 games without Goddard, which that's not great. That's not insane. But that'll get you by in a bye week struggling kind of week.
Yeah. Other side of the ball, I don't really want to start a Panther. Like a Panther. Not one. This Eagles defense is too good. They give up the 4th fewest points to the running back position, the 6th fewest to the quarterback or the wide receiver position, the 8th fewest to the quarterback position. They're top 10 against every position. I don't think this game will be competitive. I just don't want to start any of them. If I was to maybe mention one name, it'd be Chuba Hubbard as like a RB3. High-end RB3. That's probably the only one I would be comfortable. I'm not even comfortable starting him, but that I'd be willing to start.
Adam Thielen, I'll throw out there. I think you have him as a RB3, RB4. Wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. I don't want to start him, but as a slot guy, could he catch 5 passes and fall on the ground for 40 yards? It's like you can play him. I'll go find some names that are in question potentially around him, but it's possible.
Well, my thing is, okay. Yeah, he was doing fine before. He scored a touchdown with 30 seconds left last week. And then he caught this. Did you see the catch he had in overtime?
It was incredible.
Like, that was an OBJ type catch. So a lot of his points came, I mean, in overtime in the last 30 seconds of the game. But I mean, he still would have had double-digit fantasy points. But Tampa Bay is one of the easiest secondaries to throw on. So I am nervous about him going up against Philly, who's also very good against slots.
I'll just say I'll probably start him over. I don't even know over Xavier Worthy anymore. I'd start him over Leggett, who's in the same room. I'd start him over MVS. I'd start him over Quentin Johnston. I'd start him over Wan'Dale Robinson, over Parker Washington.
Yes.
Like, it's just the garbage tier. I just think he's probably the top of the garbage tier.
Yeah.
Garbage man, Adam Thielen. Maybe he'll do it again for your team and drag you into the playoffs, or at least be bad enough or good enough to not make you miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, next matchup, hopefully we'll find some more solutions here. It's the Raiders going to Tampa Bay against Tampa Bay with that terrible pass defense, and the Raiders with a terrible overall defense. Hopefully fantasy points are scored, and well, Vegas says yes. The Tampa Bay is favored by 6.5 with a 46.5 point over under. Aiden O'Connell's missing some practices right now, but it's because of illness. So hopefully, assuming he's good to play, the running back room, who's starting? It's a question every week. So far, Zamir White hasn't practiced at all. Alexander Mattison has practices in a limited fashion, which he did at the end of last week, so maybe he starts. And Amir Abdullah has been the guy this week. Are you willing to start a Raiders running back?
I'd rather not. I'd rather sit this one out, just because we don't know who's going to get the work. I got to think Sincere McCormick gets some work in this one. And Madison, if he can go, I just think it's going to be a split backfield. You're going to get Abdullah getting some of the third down work. I don't really want to start a running back. I'm very comfortable starting the wide receivers. Obviously, well, I should say Jacoby Myers. I'm very comfortable starting him. I've got him as almost a wide receiver one. Brock Bowers, I don't even talk about him. I like Aiden O'Connell in this one. I thought he actually looked pretty good against Kansas City last week. I watched a lot of that game, and that was on the road against a very good Kansas City team. I think he could do much better against Tampa Bay, who is one of the worst teams in the league against the quarterback position. So, yeah, I like Aiden O'Connell as a streamer this week when you have so many on bye.
It felt really gross having to write down Will Levis and Aiden O'Connell on our waiver wire list this week, but hey, that's legit options, and that's where you're at. Steven, I'm sure you'd rather start Aiden O'Connell over Drew Lock if that was an option.
I don't think he's available. I got to look again. I don't think he's available. Otherwise, I definitely would, but I don't think he's available.
Hop over to the other side of the football. The Buccaneers, this offense has been so good all year long, and the Bucky Irving breakout game, not that we really needed to see it, but like this was just reassuring. He is that dude for the Buccaneers. He's been incredible all season long. Steven, tell me your thoughts on the Buccaneers side of the ball.
Yeah, I was debating this with some people. I think he could not get into the top 10, but I think he will be close to a top 10 dynasty running back by the offseason. Because part of that is he's been playing so well, but also his schedule is just so good. And I think it continues this week. I think he continues that trend of, I mean, he's got 27 points in back-to-back weeks. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd like to ruin our fun because I forgot I wrote it down as a note. Hey, Bucky Irving hasn't practiced this week. Looks like Rachaad White might be the only back available. We'll see how practice goes.
I have him on my team. How did I miss that?
Practice this week.
I missed that.
I had noted.
Because he's got the hip injury.
It was a Wednesday.
No, he's had that hip injury. He injured it during the game. So,
it's been two. It's not the Wednesday skip over the. This is 2 in a row now.
No, he. If you watch that game, he injured his hip in the game, and he was questionable to return. And even at the end, like Rachaad White, I don't know if you saw, he got like a 40-yard run in overtime of that game, and they showed the coach calling like the play in, and Bucky was standing right next to him with a big ice pack wrapped around his waist. So. Yeah, Bucky, he's had. Sorry, I blanked on that, but he's had that a hip injury. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't go because they don't necessarily need him. They got 2 good running backs in White and Sean Tucker that they can play. Yeah, that sucks for people that have Bucky Irving. I mean, they did get him off the waiver wire, but Rachaad White, that makes me think that he should be good this week. He should be a good play, solid play. He'll get a ton of work. Definitely start him. Mike Evans, obviously, he's my wide receiver 8 this week. Baker Mayfield. I took a lot of heat for ranking Baker Mayfield, shortly after the Godwin injury, as my QB 15 rest of the season. He, over the last 5 weeks, he's been the QB 22, Andrew. Over the last 4 weeks, the QB 27. So he has been bad. People who can just keep plugging him into their lineups, it's not been good. But I think this week he can jump back into being good. Raiders, terrible defense, terrible secondary. I think Baker Mayfield puts in another top 10 performance, similar to what we saw at the beginning of the season. And I'm actually optimistic on Cade Otton. It's been bad for Cade Otton since he was on that run. Ever since Mike Evans returned, actually, he has not been good. But Raiders give up the third most fantasy points to the position, third most receptions, the second most receiving yards to the position. This is a smash spot for tight ends. So I think Cade Otton is definitely playable this week.
He also had 7 targets last week, and the Giants are weirdly good at stopping the tight end. I mentioned it on the show last week. It's just something they do. So I'm going to say volume in this last game just didn't turn out. Giants weirdly good at stopping tight ends. So maybe this one in a good matchup, he comes back.
Yep. Which, by the way, Andrew,
I sure hope so.
I should say thank you for holding down the fort last week, doing a solo podcast, which I'm sure is not easy to do. But I just could not make it work with my schedule last week with family in town. So I just want to say thank you.
You know what? I talked a lot, and they had to listen a lot. It was like I was a teacher again. So I'm sure they absolutely enjoyed that. We will never do that again if I can avoid it. Not for an hour-long podcast.
Yeah.
So you're welcome. The Seahawks are going to the desert to take on the Cardinals in a rematch we saw earlier in the year. Arizona is favored in this one by 2.5, even though the Seahawks won that last game in a disgusting 17-6. The Cardinals look terrible. It's a 44.5 point over under. So let's start with the road team like we've been doing. The Seahawks. It's been miserable running the football. Kenneth Walker, really good. That offensive line, really bad. And I should have guessed it in college. The offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, for the Seahawks, his thing wasn't scheming the run game. Very bland, boring run game. Just hoping that the running back makes a lot of space for himself, and that's what it's been looking like. And Kenneth Walker's been very disappointing lately. And this Cardinals defense been weirdly better lately. So, Steven, Kenneth Walker, opinions?
It's not been good. 6 points last week. Before that, he had 3 straight 13-point performances and then an 8-point performance. So he hasn't been good since he was on that tear all the way up until week 7. You still got to play him, though. When you watch him, he looks amazing. When given enough opportunity, he's explosive. He's powerful. He can catch the ball. I've got him as my RB13. It's hard because the Cardinals defense at times has looked suffocating as well. They're kind of an average matchup. They're not terrible. They're not great against the running back. They're just right in the middle of the pack. But you got to play him. I kind of feel that way about a lot of these players. I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's been on a tear this season, so he's in must-start territory. But even DK, it just hasn't been as good offensively for these players as it was early in the season. We saw DK put up all those 20-point games early. Lately, he's been just 10 points, 9 points, 14 points the last 3 weeks. He's just been kind of average. Lots of plays, just nothing to show for it so much. So I guess the guy I'm the most confident in is probably JSN. I've got him ranked ahead of DK. I'm not starting Tyler Lockett. And then Kenneth Walker, I'm obviously starting.
Yeah, Metcalf's got to step it up. He has been nursing a shoulder injury. He's not been terrible. He's been doing something. It's just not actually exciting for your fantasy lineup. JSN, steady Eddie, keep rolling him out there. Going over to the Cardinals side of the ball, the last time these two teams faced off, James Conner, 8 rushing yards on 7 carries. There's only 70-plus rushing yards one time have the Seahawks given up since week 8 when they were beat down by the Buffalo Bills. We've seen a schematic change. We've seen a personnel change on the Seahawks side of the ball. This is a good rush defense now. This is one of those you have to pay attention to a difference because this used to be the best matchup for running backs. Now this is one of the worst. But do you see James Conner bouncing back in this one?
I'd like the fantasy guides, me and Jacob, to take credit for that 8-point rush, that 8-yard rushing performance. That was the week I remember we recommended James Conner to go over 69 rushing yards. So I take responsibility
it's a nice line
for that. Yeah, I thought it was a nice line, and like you said, they were a team you could run on, but we stopped that. We prevented that. Yeah, 8 rushing yards, amazing. I mean, he's still getting the work you want to see from a running back. You have to start him. I don't think his ceiling's incredibly high in this one. I've got him as my RB14. Kyler Murray, man, he's had a yo-yo of a season so far. It's either really bad or it's been really good. They're at home, so I like it a little bit better. Seattle, they're just kind of middle of the road. I got Kyler Murray as my QB6 this week. He'd be ranked lower in other weeks where we don't have so many quarterbacks on bye. Trey McBride, obviously, you're rolling with him. He's the second best tight end in fantasy or just in general. Marvin Harrison Jr., we got the touchdown last week. He's still not having like huge games, but he's been fine. He's my wide receiver 24 this week. That's probably about it, though.
He does not have a double-digit game this year without a touchdown being a part of that.
Yeah, you know what? I was pointing that out for Mark Andrews the last couple of weeks. Like, he only has double-digit performances when he scores touchdowns. And I kept recommending him as a sit, and he just keeps scoring touchdowns. I'm like, well, I'm out. I can't keep projecting him not to score a touchdown.
Some teams are just going to do that to you. A game we're hoping to get lots of touchdowns from is that one and this next game with another NFC West team in it. The Bills at the Rams in LA. It is Buffalo favored by 5 and over under a 49.5. The Rams have been incredibly up and down, but the Bills have been steady Eddie for you all season in fantasy and in real life. Josh Allen, stardom, duh. James Cook, stardom, duh. Dalton Kincaid, probably going to miss this week, it looks like, but he is practicing, so willing to start Dalton Kincaid. The only questions we have, wide receiver side of the football. Keon Coleman looks like he'll be back. Khalil Shakir is there. Amari Cooper's there. Rank those receivers for me, Steven. Cooper, Shakir, Coleman.
I would go Shakir, Cooper, Coleman, I think. And I don't think there'd be a huge difference between Cooper and Coleman in my rankings. Shakir's just been more, you can trust him a little bit better. Weirdly enough, the Rams giving up the second fewest receptions to wide receivers, but they're giving up a ton of touchdowns. So, and these receivers, like you said, I think you had pointed out, Andrew, they're not catching a lot of touchdowns in Buffalo. So it's been it's just a weird, like Josh Allen has a lot of touchdown passes, but like the receivers aren't catching a ton of them. Khalil Shakir is getting you a lot between the 20s, but not so much in the end zone. James Cook has scored a lot of touchdowns. I just don't feel comfortable in anyone other than Shakir, and I don't even think Shakir's ceiling is all that high. I think his ceiling is like 19 or 20 points. So I'm willing to start Amari, but I've got him as like a mid-range wide receiver 3.
We haven't seen how this is going to work out, these three all playing together consistently. So we could see a lot of things. I agree with you on the wide receiver side there. Shakir, then Cooper, then Coleman. Maybe if Cooper just holds onto the football instead of passing to Josh Allen, we'd get some more production out of him.
Amari Cooper hasn't. Which game was his first game with Buffalo? Do you remember which game it was? I'm just looking at his game logs.
I'd have to go look and take a guess.
I feel like it might have been Philly or Tennessee, but he's just not even playing 50% of the snaps since he joined the team. That's the troubling thing. And now we got Keon Coleman back. Cooper's not getting more than 3 targets a game. So
week 7 was his first week.
Okay, so yeah. He had 5 targets week 7. Since then, he's had 2, 3, and 3 targets. Like I said, hasn't hit more than 51% of the snaps in any of those games. I would prefer another option because I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's happening with him in Buffalo so far.
The LA side of the ball, easy peasy. Start Kyron, start Cooper Kupp, start Puka. Don't start anyone else. Matthew Stafford, he's a toss-up if you want to chase upside in a game with a huge over-under where he is at home. I'm fine with chasing it, but he's a streamer. He's not a guaranteed start. Steven, any thoughts there?
I mean, Buffalo's given up the third fewest points to the position. I know it's hard to compare these, but I don't know if you remember the game, the opening night after the Rams won the Super Bowl. Buffalo went in there and just destroyed this team. Now, that was a few years ago. But I don't think that the Rams have an incredible home field advantage or anything. I think Buffalo's playing very well right now. I'm nervous about some of these Rams players. The best matchup is for Kyron. Obviously, he's a must start. I wouldn't feel super comfortable playing Matthew Stafford, but he's one of those guys that when you think it's a bad matchup, he can come through. Those receivers are good. It just makes me nervous.
Yeah, hopefully the over-under saves us, and they're at home, so maybe we get a shootout. The Rams like to show out against the best opponents. They, I guess, just overlook the easy ones.
Yeah.
The Bears are going to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. That spread is 4 points in favor of San Francisco, despite a myriad of injuries. Ouchie, Christian McCaffrey down. Ouchie, Jordan Mason down. Hello. Isaac Guerendo. But the Bears side of the football is where we're starting. Caleb Williams has been playing much better lately and throwing the ball more lately. 6 more times per game to be exact ever since Thomas Brown took over.
Okay.
But not just that, their dropback rate over expectation has been double digits percentages, which is a lot in in 2 of the last 3 games with Thomas Brown at the helm. So this passing game's been looking a lot better. And Steven, I don't know if you've seen it, both Swift and Johnson have not practiced this week in concussion protocol.
Yikes. That makes me, it makes me like Caleb that much more. If he's going to pass a lot, and we know he's going to run around too. He's had back-to-back top 5 finishes, scored over back-to-back weeks of exactly pretty much 26 fantasy points. I don't love that it's in San Francisco, but I got him ranked as my QB 13. I think that he could come through in this one. San Francisco, on paper, they're a tough matchup. Now, I know playing in Buffalo in the snow against Josh Allen, it's hard. They looked awful, but I think we all kind of saw that coming a little bit. It did not feel like they were going to go into Buffalo in the snow and put up a good game. So I like Caleb this week. The receivers, obviously, with these running backs both potentially not playing, makes me love the receivers that much more. So, yeah, I think you can play all 3 of these guys. I would rank them more Keenan and then Rome. I think Rome more of like a flex play if you have to play him. But I think it's hard to say. Any of these guys could come through. Don't love Cole Kmet as much. 49ers historically in this year are very good against the tight end. But, I've got him as my mid-range tight end too this week.
DJ Moore, ever since Thomas Brown took over, they've changed up his role. They've made him more of a yards after catch guy, give him a lot of screens. His ADOT has dropped immensely, which is great for him because he's good at being dynamic in terms of the screen game and then stretching the field whenever he catches you off guard. It's been great. Keenan Allen, not much of a change in usage other than, really the targets haven't changed much either. Same with the Dunze. So hopefully we see them continue to roll there. The 49ers side of the ball, Guerendo, all of a sudden, I don't know where you have him ranked, Steven, but he's got to be close to top 15 with everyone hurt in this offense.
He's at 15 for me. I got him exactly at 15.
Nailed it.
One area the Bears haven't been as good against is the run game. They are giving up the 10th most fantasy points to running backs. They're giving up the 9th most touches per game to the position and the 8th most total yards to running backs. And he should get a lot of work in this one. So yeah, I like Guerendo in this one. I don't love Brock Purdy as much. I do have him ranked as my QB 11 only because of the bye weeks. But I did not like what I saw. Chicago giving up the second fewest points to the quarterback position. He's not really a mobile quarterback, so he makes me nervous starting him because I do think the Chicago Bears, if this game was in Chicago, I'd be much lower on him. But the fact that they're playing at home, I do think that he could be decent in this one. You're starting George Kittle. The wide receivers, I'm still willing to start him. Debo, man, it looked like it was going to be a good season for Debo. It's just not happening. He's wide receiver 3 for me. Actually, both him and Jennings are wide receiver 3s for me. I don't feel comfortable starting him. I'm willing to, depending on my other options.
Full agreement there. So I'll move us on to the next one. Steven, we're making great time. We're on to Sunday Night Football already for an AFC West matchup. The Chargers going to Kansas City in Arrowhead with the Chiefs favored by 3.5, over under 42.5. Starting on the Chargers side of the ball, please, Ladd McConkey play because this Chiefs team has somehow become a really good matchup for wide receivers in the passing game. Like Bryce Young played well against the Chiefs. So if Ladd McConkey's in, he's pushing wide receiver 1 territory at this point. Don't know if he'll go. The running game is decimated. We're running out of options in this offense for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it. I watched the game 2 weeks ago when he injured his shoulder. And then I watched again last week and saw him injure his shoulder. I didn't realize it was a different shoulder. So he's dealing with 2 injured shoulders right now. And if you just look at the guy, he looks like a Pop Warner player still to me. Like, I don't know, like I'm not making fun of him, but he just looks tiny out there. So I'm not surprised he's a little bit beat up. But yes, please let him play. I am not very high. I'm not very optimistic about Justin Herbert in this one. I've got him ranked. Actually, I got him ranked as like QB 13 right now. I'll look at my rankings a little bit closer this week. I'm not optimistic about, especially if McConkey's out. If McConkey's out, I'm probably not looking to start Herbert. He did not look good last week. McConkey was the only one doing it, and he was just doing it between the 20s. Will Dissly, I do think, especially if McConkey's out, he gave you 0 points last week. But I think I still think I believe in him. I got him as a back end tight end one in this one. The Chiefs, we talked about it a few times, I think, Andrew, this season. They're pretty good on defense, but not against the tight end position. They're one of the worst against the tight end position. You could funnel an offense through the tight end, so I think he can come through in this one. I got him as, like I said, the tight end 12. I'm not starting Gus Edwards in this one if I can help it. Chiefs very good against the running back position. He doesn't provide a whole lot of juice. They give up the fewest points to the position, so I've got him as an RB3. Again, lots of bye weeks, so it kind of depends on your situation, but I'm not optimistic about him.
The Chiefs are now a run funnel like the Detroit Lions have been all season. So yeah, passing game, good. Running game, bad. Chiefs side of the ball, Patrick Mahomes having to throw more, having to do more. And we have Isaiah Pacheco now in the fold. This offense becomes a lot more confusing, yet having a decently high upside, even in a tough matchup. So what are you thinking on the Chiefs side of the football here?
It's just crazy that we have Patrick Mahomes and we have Justin Herbert, two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, with an over-under of 42.5, which is a low over.
You're not wrong.
It's weird days. But Patrick Mahomes, yeah, he's a back end. Well, I've got him actually ranked as more of a mid-range QB1. I got him as QB8. Travis Kelce, start him because he's Travis Kelce. Noah Gray could be annoying, but it is what it is. The wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, you had just mentioned if they don't score a touchdown, they don't get you double-digit points. I assume that's Hopkins as well. It seems like he's only been coming through when he scores a touchdown, so not super optimistic on him. I got him as a wide receiver 3 in my rankings this week. And then the running back position, like you mentioned, not great. And the matchup's not great. The Chargers not giving up, they give up the fewest touchdowns to the position. They give up the 6th fewest fantasy points to the position. So that I don't really want to start either one of them. I am willing to start Pacheco as more of like a 3. And I've got Kareem Hunt shortly after that, but I don't know. It feels like a bit of a mess to me. And then Worthy, I got him as a flex play at best.
Yeah, I would rather start, let's say it's your flex position. I'm starting Worthy over either running back just because we don't know how it's going to unfold. Whenever Pacheco does take it, he already looks good. He had a big breakaway run against the Raiders last week, which is the Raiders, so whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just not great. Noah Gray is borderline a better start all of a sudden than maybe those running backs, but I don't want to go too far with that one. What I do want to go to.
It's one of those things you've watched him do it 2 or 3 weeks in a row. It's a trap. You put him in your lineup, and that's the day he gets you literally 0 points.
He's waiting for you. He wants you to do it. He's daring you, but it might just be Nick Westbrook-Akine again, and maybe he's going to do it 8 times in a row when it doesn't make any sense.
We'll see.
That does make sense that lots. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I did nothing.
Let's move us to the Simpsons game. All right. The game that shouldn't be in the Monday Night Football slot anymore, but is because they already drew up the Simpsons animations. We have the Bengals going to Dallas to take on a Cowboys team. Neither of these teams can really make the playoffs anymore. It's completely meaningless. I'm going to watch it anyway because Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Chase Brown are about to take on a defense that's been better lately, but a defense that hasn't been able to stop much. We expect a lot in this one. I mean, we'll just go through it. Steven, tell me if I'm wrong. You start Joe Burrow. You start Chase Brown as a top 10 running back for sure. Chase, Higgins, both top 15. I'm not starting a tight end because you can't trust either one of them, but that's it. Start your studs.
Yeah, I actually have Chase Brown as my RB3 on the week, so I think Chase Brown could.
There you go.
He just looks good. He looks really good, and he's getting all the work. So, yeah, and actually, T. Higgins. There's been times when I'm watching the game, he looks really good. I've always thought he was good. He's just his things. He's always injured, but there was a few times I was watching that game. I was getting him and Jamar Chase. Andrew, I didn't have my glasses on, so my vision's not the greatest, but. So maybe you disagree, but I thought so. There's a few times I was like, "Is that Jamar Chase?" Higgins just looks amazing right now.
He's trying to earn that contract. Go UT Higgins. Earn that contract. Earn us a championship. Yeah. And Chase is gonna get his. We know that. The Higgins is the question, and man, he's doing everything he can to earn that. The Cowboys side of the football, being led by Cooper Rush. I'll eat my words. It's been better than I would have thought. I was guessing a Tommy DeVito-esque experience for the Cowboys. It's been tolerable. Now, the upside, vanished. Gone. CeeDee Lamb, no, it's not there. But the floor has been there each and every week. Cooper Rush, he's borderline streamable if you want to chase it at home against Cincinnati. And Rico Dowdle is downright. He's becoming a good play in fantasy, especially in what could be a good matchup.
I'm actually curious. Rico Dowdle's a free agent at the end of this year. I think they should probably re-sign him. You got to think they could get him pretty cheap because he's really only, the Tony Pollard thing. We saw like a few good seasons out of Tony Pollard. We've seen a few good games out of Dowdle. Well, actually, I'd say more than a few good games. He's been pretty good for most of the season. You got to think they could get him pretty cheap. But, and I heard a lot of people saying, CeeDee Lamb, they're very upset with him because of how bad he was last game. He missed almost half the game. If you were watching that game, he hurt his shoulder and he played like 65% of the snaps. So by halftime, just shortly after halftime, he didn't play anymore. So Cooper Rush, I actually think is streamable in this one. Cincinnati, they are, 6-point favorites in this one. So we know that the Cowboys are going to have to keep up with the Bengals, and they're playing at home. So I think that Cooper Rush actually is streamable. I think the Bengals giving up the third most fantasy points to the position. They're giving up the 8th most passing yards to the position. So I think Rush is streamable. I think Dowdle, he's a mid-range RB2 in this one. Jake Ferguson, I think, is going to go in this one. From just the stuff I've seen, I love him in this one. If he does go, I think he's a tight end 1. Bengals giving up the second most points to the tight end position, second most receiving touchdown, basically top 5 numbers across the board to tight ends. So I like him in this one. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, he is playing, right? Am I correct on that?
He's not practiced yet, but he's told everyone, I'm managing it. I plan on being out there. I thought. So technically, set your auto sub. We don't know for sure, but he should be out there.
Well, let's just assume if he doesn't play, then I'm not downgrading Rush. He's probably less streamable in that situation. But
not streamable.
But I still think Dowdle. I still think Ferguson. Obviously, I like those guys even, maybe not more, but at least as much. Maybe Ferguson a little bit more. And then it makes someone like Brandon Cooks more interesting because I think they will have to play catch up in this one, and they will pass a lot. We saw Rush throw for over 350 yards a few weeks ago. So, yeah, I think the other pass catchers could be kind of Hail Mary plays if Lamb is out.
There you have it. All the games.
We did it,
Week 14. We're talking playoffs. Playoffs? Next week. We're ready for it. We'll be guiding you all the way through it. We'll have to come up with some special format for that to make sure we get everything we need. But we'll take you out of this one. Thank you for tuning into the Fantasy Guides podcast. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the follow button. Please keep on supporting us because we want to support you. Get you a weekly season guide at fantasyguides.com for less than the price of a box of hot chocolate. Honey, no. We don't need that. There's no nutrition there.
This is a holiday version.
I'm trying to get... We even got the Thanksgiving version last week, Steven. We're here for it. Get you a fantasy guide. Get you a fantasy guy. Ignore the hot chocolate this season. Follow our page on Instagram, X, TikTok, everywhere at Fantasy Guides. I'm Andrew Teuscher. That's Steven Rippey. Steven, say goodbye to the friends at home.
All right. Bye, friends. Good luck this week.